Sometimes connection is loud, like thunder breaking the sky. Other times it's quiet, almost invisible until you realize it's already touched your heart. For me, it began with something ordinary. Just moving in with a friend. No drama, no fairy tale. Just two women sharing a narrow brownstone flat entrying to make life work in the city. At first, I thought it would be simple, but late nights. Laughter reconchinif the high ceilings, and the way Hergas lingered just a little longer, Maddie ordinary moments feel extraordinary. I remember the first time Lena truly stood out to me. Not the casual nods in the campus cafe or the smiles atop in Mike nights. But the day I dragged a battered suitcase and 3 cardboard boxes up for flights of stairs to her apartment. Jesus, you travel like a turtle, Lena laughed from the landing. One hip cocked against the banister, dark curls escaping her messy bun. This is everything I own, I panted, shoving past her with a grin. The flat walls, tiny 2 bedrooms, paper-thin walls, a kitchenette that barely fit people but it smelled of fresh paint and possibility. No more dorms, no more strangers, just a space of our own. Lena was my opposite in every way. I was cautious, soft-spoken, the kind offerson who apologized to furniture. She was kinetic, all sharp wit and willed gestures, her hazel eyes flashing like she'd already seen the punchline off the universe. We slipped into a rhythm fast. I opened the bakery at 5 a.m. She taught yoga classes until 9 p.m. Our days barely overlapped. But our vannings were sacred steaming mugs of cheap red wine. Take out Curryant's fire escape, talking until the city lights blurred at first. It was just refuge and friendship. Then came the small manners. Reaching for the same mug, elbows brushing at the sink, laughing at the same ridiculous meme. They felt inconsequential, but I cataloged them like pressed flowers. One night I came home to find her sprawled across the couch. Legs over the armrest, hair still wet from Thesauer, the faint scent of eucalypto sans soap drifting in the air. "You're late," she said, not looking up from her book, but her voice curled warm around the words. "Traffic was murder," I muttered, kicking off my shoes. "Hungry?" she asked. I shook my head. She closed the book anyway. Pedetto, the kitchen. And started rehating a liver pad thai without being asked in that unremarkable act. I felt Theffler tilt. We ate cross-legged on the rug, passing the carton back and forth. Some old sitcom flickering on the TV. Halfway through exhaustion pinned me to the cushions. My head lolled. My eyes drifted shut. And then I felt it a deliberate pressure, her shoulder settling against mine, staying there, not accidental, not fleeting. I held me breath, afraid to shatter it. Thello track babbled on, but all I heard was the soft sink of our breathing. Morning came. I convinced myself it was nothing. I teased her about that trill of bobby pins. She left like breadcrumbs, laughed when she stilleth last of my coffee. Acted like Theward hadn't quietly rearranged itself, but the memory clung. That weekend met friends at a rooftop bar. Lenoa's electric dancing, barefoot on throne tiles. His arms slung around my waist to keep from falling, she claimed. To everyone else, it looked like best friend mischief. To me it felt like a promise. A stumpfly shift, flowers still dusted my hair. The apartment was except for the blue glow of her laptop. She looked up, brow creased. "You okay?" "Dead," I sighed, collapsing into theorem chair. She closed the screen, crossed the room, and rested her hand in the back of my neck, thumb tracing slow. Circles until the tension leaked out of me like air from a puncture tire. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure if I meant for the touch or foreseeing me so completely. She smiled, small and crooked. And the room felt suddenly too small for everything weren't saying after that. The silences thickened. Laughter carried subtext. A brushed strand of hair became a dare. I lay awake cataloging glances, replaying the way her fingers had lingered wench past me a glass of water. My heart insisted it was mutual. My brain built barricades of what-ifs. The air turned electric, humming like a moment before rain. Every shared hallway, every accidental graze off knuckles, every inside joke felt weighted with meaning. Or maybe I was imagining it. But I knew I wasn't single. When Friday night I came home late, the city's heat still clinging to Miskin. The living room was lit by a single thrift store lamp with a Phrygian shade. Lena was curled on the couch, hoodie pulled up like a turtle shell, phone glowing against her cheek. "Hey," she murmured, sitting up when the door clicked shut. "Hey yourself," I said, dropping my bag. My voice sounded steadier than Heartfelt. She studied me for a beat. "Rough one?" "Endless." I towed off my sneakers, padded over, and sank beside her. The cushions dipped, our knees touched. Neither of us moved away. For a minute, we just breathed. Theanly sound the hum of the refrigerator distant sirens. Then she reached for the remote, thumb hovering. "Movie." "Sure," she scrolled. Landed on something black hand white with subtitles. Theo panning credits rolled. Halfway through, her head found its way to my shoulders, slow, deliberate. Like she'd been waiting for permission I hadn't known I was giving. I let my cheek rest against her hair. She smelled like a rain on pavement, and the lavender candle she burned when she see OULDN, single quotes two-willed on screen. In our living room, the space between us shrank to nothing. Her fingers brushed mine on the cushion once, twice then stayed. I turned my hand palm up. She threaded our fingers without looking. My pulse thundered so loudly, I was sure she could hear it. The credits rolled. Neither of us moved. Finally she spoke, voice barreled above, a whisper. "I've been thinking about this for weeks." "Me too," I admitted. The words felt like stepping off a ledge. She lifted her head, eyes searching me in the lamplight. And I'm terrified," I said, laughing softly. "But I'm more terrified of not agreeing." Her smile broke slow, sunrise after the longest night. She leaned in, hesitant, giving me every chance to topple away. I didn't. Our lips met, tentative, tasting of wine and wantoned, the faint salt of nervous sweat. When we parted, forehead still touching, she whispered, "Hi, hi," I echoed, grinning like an idiot. Outside, thunder rumbled real this time. Low and rolling over the rooftops dot inside, the storm had already broken, and everything ordinary had become extraordinary. The salt-stung air of the coastal town clung to everything: my hair, my clothes, the creaky wooden floors of the beach house Lila and I had been sharing for 3 months. It was supposed to be temporary, stopgap after my lease fell through and her landlord jacked up the rent on her apartment in the city. "Just until you sort things out," she'd said, tossing me a key with that half smile that made my chest do strange things. I told myself it was gratitude, nothing more. That evening, I trudged through the door. Ow! The weight of a 12-hour shift at the marina pressing into my bones. Leela was sprawled on the faded blue couch, a book splayed open on her chest. Her dark hair fanned out like ink against the cushions. She looked up, her hazel eyes catching the dim glow of the lantern-style lamp. "Rough day?" she asked, voice soft but laced with something knowing. "You have no idea," I muttered, kicking off my boots. They landed with a thud near the door, leaving faint traces of sand. My shoulders ached, not just from hauling crates of fish and gear, but from the things I didn't say. The way I'd caught myself watching her that morning as she watered the scraggly herbs on the windowsill. The way her laugh had lingered in my head all day, bright and sharp like the gulls outside. She patted the couch beside her. "Sit, you look like you're about to collapse." I hesitated, my pulse stuttering for reasons I couldn't name, then sank down next to her. She tugged the woven throw blanket over us both, her movements easy, like we'd done this 100 times. Maybe we had. "Want to talk about it?" she asked, tilting her head. "Nothing to say," I lied. Staring at the cracked coffee table littered with her sketch pencils and my half-empty coffee mug from that morning, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy with all the things I couldn't bring myself to voice. How her presence filled the house in a way that made it feel less like a rental and more like a home. How I'd started noticing the smallest things: her habit of humming when she cooked, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. Her eyes found mine, steady and searching, like she could see the storm brewing under my skin. I wanted to tell her everything. How I'd started dreading the day I'd have to move out. How her closeness made something in me unravel. But the words lodged in my throat, stubborn and useless. Then she shifted, her knee brushing mine under the blanket. The contact was fleeting, but it sent a jolt through me. "You've been off lately," she said, her voice low, careful, like she was testing the waters. My stomach twisted. "Off how?" She shrugged, but her gaze didn't waver. "Just different. Quieter, maybe? Like you're carrying something?" "Maybe I'm just tired," I said, the excuse sounding hollow even to me. She didn't push, just nodded and turned back to her book. But the air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks the next morning. I woke to the smell of coffee and the faint clatter of dishes. Lila was in the kitchen, barefoot, her oversized sweater slipping off one shoulder as she poured coffee into two chipped mugs, one with a faded lighthouse, the other with a cartoon crab. The early light streamed through the window, catching the loose strands of her hair and the curve of her neck. I froze in the doorway, my breath catching. "Morning," she said, smiling like she hadn't just stopped my heart. She slid a mug toward me. Our fingers brushed as I took it, and for a second, neither of us moved. Her skin was warm, and the contact lingered longer than it should have. She didn't step back. Instead, she leaned against the counter, close enough that I could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo. "You don't have to keep playing tough guy, you know," she said, her voice soft but pointed. "If something's eating at you, I'm here." For a moment I thought she knew. That maybe she felt the same pull, the same unspoken thing humming between us. My pulse raced, but I forced a grin. "I'm good, Lila. Promise." She studied me, her lips parting like she wanted to say more, but then she just nodded and turned to rinse a plate. I sipped the coffee, bitter and perfect, and tried not to stare at the way the sunlight painted her silhouette. That night, we fell into our routine dinner on the porch, the ocean murmuring in the distance. A cheesy horror movie flickering on the ancient TV. Lila curled up on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a bowl of popcorn balanced precariously on her lap. Halfway through, she stretched, her arm draping across the back of the couch, her fingers grazing my shoulder. It was accidental, probably, but I froze. Hyper-aware of the warmth of her touch. "Sorry," she said quickly, pulling back, her cheeks flushing faintly in the TV's glow. "Don't be," I said, too soft, too fast. I wasn't sure she heard me over the movie's screams. A week later, ended up at a bonfire hosted by her friend Mara, a local artist who turned every gathering into a spectacle. The beach was alive with laughter, music, and the crackle of the fire. Lila was in her element, weaving through the crowd, her laughter bright as she danced with Mara and a few others. I hung back, nursing a beer, my eyes tracking her despite myself. The firelight caught the angles of her face, the way her dress swayed when she moved. She was magnetic, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. Every so often, her gaze found mine across the flames, holding for a beat longer than necessary before she'd turn back to her friends. At one point, a Geism surfer with too much confidence leaned in close. His hand on her arm as he said something that made her laugh. A sharp, ugly pang twisted in my chest. I told myself it was nothing. She was just being Lila warm, open, impossible not to love. Later, walking back to the house along the shoreline, the waves lapping at our feet, Lila nudged my shoulder. "You were quiet tonight. Not a fan of bonfires?" "They're fine," I said, shoving my hands into my pockets. "Just not my scene." She smirked. "You're such a grump sometimes. How do we even work as roommates?" I glanced at her, the moonlight catching the mischief in her eyes. "Don't know, but it works." Her smile softened, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just us. The sand, the sea. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It does." I thought she might say more, that the space between us might finally close. But she looked away, and the moment slipped into the tide. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew, a living thing that pulsed in the quiet moments. One evening, we ended up on the porch again, the sky streaked with pink and orange. Lila held a glass of wine, her sketchbook open on her lap, though she hadn't drawn anything in a while. I sipped a beer, the cold bottle grounding me. Do you ever think about what's next? She asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the hum of crickets. Next? Yeah, like 5 years from now. Where we'll be. Who will be? She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. Who will be with? My heart thudded. The question was casual, but it landed like a stone. I try not to, I said, aiming for light but landing somewhere heavier. What about you? She shrugged, her eyes on the horizon. I don't want to be alone, you know? I want someone who gets me, who feels like home. The words hung between us, fragile and loaded. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that she was already home to me. But I just nodded, my throat tight. The shift came on a rainy Saturday, the kind of day that trapped us indoors. Lila's friends had come over to play cards, the living room filled with laughter and the clink of beer bottles. I leaned against the wall, watching her deal cards with that easy grin, her voice rising above the chatter. She was the sun in the room, and everyone orbited her. Then one of her friends, Jonah, leaned over to whisper something, his hand brushing her wrist. She laughed, bright and unguarded, and jealousy stabbed through me, hot and irrational. When the others left, I lingered in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes that didn't need scrubbing. Lila joined me, drying a glass with a towel. You okay? She asked, her voice soft. Yeah, I lied. My hands still in the soapy water. She stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine. You sure? You've been weird all night. I turned to face her, the small space between us electric. I'm fine, Lila. Her eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought she might call me out. Instead, she reached past me to set the glass down, her arm grazing mine. Neither of us moved. The rain pounded against the windows. The world outside blurred and distant. Elliot, she said, my name barely a whisper. Her hand lingered near mine on the counter, her fingers brushing the edge of my palm. My breath caught, and I leaned in just a fraction, testing the space between us. But then she stepped back, her cheeks flushed, and the moment shattered. I should. Check the dryer, she mumbled, slipping away. That night, I lay awake, the rain a steady drum against the roof. Every moment replayed in my head, her laugh, her touch, the way her eyes lingered. We weren't just roommates anymore. We hadn't been for a long time. Something was building, delicate and undeniable. And I didn't know how much longer I could pretend it wasn't there. The next morning, I found her on the porch, sketching the ocean. I stood in the doorway, watching her, the weight of everything unsaid pressing against my ribs. She looked up, her smile soft but guarded. Coffee? She asked. Yeah, I said, stepping outside. Lila, can we talk? Her pencil stilled and her eyes met mine, wide and searching. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was open, waiting. The radiator clanked like an old man clearing his throat. I was on my knees in the narrow galley kitchen, scrubbing at a stain that had probably been there since the Clinton administration. The apartment smelled of lemon cleaner and the ghost of last night's takeout lo mein. Lila stood in the doorway, one hip against the frame, arms folded under the oversized cardigan she'd stolen from my closet months ago. Her dark hair was twisted up with a pencil, a few strands escaping like they were trying to flee the conversation we hadn't had yet. You're going to sand the finish off the counter, she said. Counters are overrated. I didn't look up. Someone has to keep this place from turning into a biohazard. She patted in, socked feet silent on the cracked linoleum. You've been someone for 3 weeks straight. Satrap, you're not fine. I snorted. Define fine. Fine is not stress cleaning at 2 a.m. Fine is not flinching every time the toaster pops. Fine as she stopped because I'd gone still, sponge dripping in my fist. Jasper. The name landed soft, the way she always said it, like it was something breakable. I set the sponge down, wiped my hands on a dish towel that had seen better decades. I'm handling it. You keep saying that. She moved closer. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of her shampoo, something green, like crushed herbs. But your shoulders are up by your ears, and you haven't slept through the night since the layoff. I opened my mouth to deflect, but the words tangled. She was right, and we both knew it. The freelance gigs had dried up, the savings were a joke, and every rejection email felt like a small, precise cut. I'd been bleeding out in slow motion, and the our apartment was the only thing I could still control. Lila crouched beside me, elbows on her knees. "Talk to me, Jazz." I met her eyes then. They were the color of storm glass, gray-green and impossible to lie to. "What if I can't fix this?" Her hand found mine, fingers threading without hesitation. The same way she'd grabbed my hand 6 months ago when we'd run for the last train, laughing like idiots, her palm warm against the January wind. That night, it had been adrenaline. Tonight, it was something steadier. "You don't have to fix it alone," she said. The air shifted, thick with dishwasher steam and the low hum of the fridge. I should have pulled away. Instead, my thumb traced the ridge of her knuckles. A question I hadn't meant to ask. She didn't move. "You feel that too, right?" I swallowed. "Define that." A laugh huffed out of her, soft. "The thing where the room gets smaller every time we're in it. The thing where I catch you looking at me like I'm the answer to a question you haven't said out loud." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Leela, I'm not imagining it." Her voice dropped. "Tell me I am." I couldn't, because she wasn't. Because for weeks I'd been cataloging the way she hummed while folding laundry. The way she left her sketchbooks open like invitations. The way her laugh cracked open something in my chest I'd boarded up years ago. I stood, pulling her with me. We were close now, close enough that I could see the faint freckles across her nose. The tiny scar at her hairline from when she'd tried to dye her hair blue in college. Her breath hitched. "Tell me to stop," I said. She didn't. I kissed her like I was drowning, and she was the surface. Slow, careful, like we were both afraid the moment would shatter. Her hands fisted in my t-shirt, anchoring. When we broke apart, our foreheads stayed pressed together, breathing the same air. "Still handling it?" She whispered, a laugh scraped out of me, rusty. "Shut up." We didn't make it to the couch. The counter was cold against my back, her cardigan soft under my palms. We kissed until the kettle whistled and startled us both, until the stain on the counter was forgotten and the radiator clanked its approval. Later, we migrated to the living room, a nest of blankets and half-finished mugs of tea. The TV murmured some late-night rerun, but we weren't watching. Lila's head was on my chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns over my heart. "Do we tell Marcus?" she asked. Marcus, our third roommate, currently snoring in the next room like a chainsaw with asthma. "Not yet." I pressed my lips to her hair. "Let's keep this ours for a minute," she nodded, burrowing closer. "The world's loud. This is quiet." Days after were a secret language. She'd leave her sketchbook on the kitchen table with a new drawing, a tiny cartoon of us sharing headphones on the subway. I'd find her favorite tea in the cupboard when I knew I hadn't bought it. We'd brush past each other in the hallway and pause, just long enough for a thumb to graze a wrist, a promise for later. One night, the power went out. The city outside flickered, then went dark. We lit candles that smelled like pine and bad decisions. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, dealing cards by candlelight. "Jin," she declared, laying down her hand. "You're a card shark," I accused. "Graphic designer. Same skill set." She grinned, then sobered. "Jazz. Yeah, I'm scared too. The freelance thing, the rent, all of it. But I'm less scared with you." I set my cards down. "Same. We didn't say I love you. Not yet. It was too big, too new. Instead, we played another hand, and when she won again, she'd crawled across the blanket to kiss me, slow and thorough, until the candles burned low and the dark didn't feel so heavy. Weeks slipped by. I landed a small contract enough to cover rent, not enough to breathe easy. Lila's freelance dried up too, but we made it work. Grocery runs became joint missions. Her pushing the cart while I tossed in off-brand cereal and pretended not to notice her sneaking in the good coffee. One afternoon, Marcus caught us. We were in the kitchen, Leela perched on the counter, me standing between her knees, stealing kisses between bites of peanut butter sandwich. The door banged open. Marcus froze, grocery bags dangling. Well, this explains the weird vibes. Lila went crimson. I cleared my throat. Surprise? Marcus blinked, then grinned like a Cheshire cat. About damn time. You two have been eye-sexing each other since the Super Bowl. We have not, Lila started. Have to, he said, dropping the bags. I'm making popcorn. You're telling me everything. We did not everything. But we told him enough. He whooped, hugged us both, then demanded to be best man at the wedding that wasn't even a glimmer yet. That night, Lila and I lay tangled in my bed, the window cracked to let in the city sounds. Her head was on my shoulder, fingers linked with mine. Think we'll make it? She asked, voice small. I thought of the stain on the counter, still there despite my scrubbing. Thought of the way she'd looked at me that first night like I was worth the risk. Yeah, I said. We will. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, her breathing evened out, warm against my neck. The radiator clanked once, twice, then settled. For the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of falling. The radiator in our new apartment clanked like it had opinions. I was 26, fresh off a lease I'd signed with a stranger named Elias, and convinced that adulthood meant learning to ignore the sound of someone else's life bleeding through the walls. Elias was already there when I arrived, sleeves rolled high. Wrestling a box labeled "Fragile, do not drop into the narrow hallway." He looked up, hair falling across his forehead, and offered the kind of half-smile that said he'd already decided we'd get along. Hope you like chaos, he said, kicking the door shut behind me. I cook with every pot at once. What? I laughed too loud. To nervous and, that was the first thread. We divided the space like diplomats. I took the bedroom with the cracked window that whistled when the wind came off the river. He claimed the one overlooking the alley where cats held nightly tribunals. The living room became neutral territory. A no man's land of mismatched furniture and a coffee table scarred with rings from takeout containers. At night, we orbited each other, me on the couch with case files. I'm sprawled across the rug, sketching logos for startups that paid in exposure. Sometimes our knees brushed. Neither of us moved away. Mornings belonged to him. He'd emerge from his room in an old concert tee, hair defying gravity, humming something off-key while he cracked eggs into a pan that had seen better decades. I'd pretend to read the paper. But really I was cataloging the way sunlight caught the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way he salted everything like he was seasoning the day itself. He'd slide a plate across the counter, catch me staring, and grin like he'd won a bet with the universe. Eat, he'd say. You look like you subsist on caffeine and spite. I'd roll my eyes, but I ate. Every bite felt like a secret we hadn't named yet. Evenings were quieter. He'd stretch out on the couch, feet in my lap without asking, and talk about growing up in a house where silence was a currency. His mother collected silence the way other people collected stamps. His father spent it like loose change. Elias learned early to fill the gaps with stories about the summer. He tried to build a treehouse and ended up with a pile of splinters and a lifelong fear of heights. About the dog that followed him home and stayed for 3 days before vanishing like a ghost. He told me things he said he'd never told anyone, and I hoarded them the way dragons hoard gold. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't lust. It was gravity's law, inexorable, pulling us into the same orbit until the space between us felt like a held breath. Then came the night at the Lantern, a bar wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat that smelled of bleach and regret. The air was thick with smoke and synth pop. Elias leaned against the bar, laughing at something a woman in a red dress said, her hand lingering on his forearm like she was testing the temperature of water. My stomach folded in on itself. He didn't flirt back. He never did, but he didn't pull away either. I nursed a gin and tonic until the ice melted into sadness. In the cab home, the city lights smeared across the windows like wet paint. He watched me instead of the view. You're quiet, he said. I'm always quiet, not like this. The apartment was dark when we got in, just the glow from the street lamp slicing through the blinds. I dropped my keys on the counter too hard. They clattered like accusations. Do you like her? I asked. The words tasted like rust. He blinked. Who? The red dress. The one who touched you like she had a right. He rubbed the back of his neck the way he did when he was buying time. I didn't ask her to. That's not what I asked. Silence stretched between us, thin and sharp. Then he stepped closer, voice low. I don't know what we are, Milo, and that's terrifying. Because if I say the wrong thing, I lose you. And losing you isn't an option. My pulse hammered in my throat. You think I'm not scared? I've been scared since the first time you handed me coffee and our fingers brushed. Scared I imagined it. Scared you'd laugh. Scared I'd ruin the only good thing I've got. His eyes glistened. You're the only good thing I've got. The room tilted. I pressed my palm to his chest, felt the frantic beat beneath bone and cotton. Then figure it out with me. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years, and then his arms were around me, solid and warm and home. I don't want to lose you, he whispered into my hair. You won't, I promised, and meant it with every cell. Later. Tangled on the couch under a blanket that smelled of detergent and him, he said it plain. I like you. Not as a friend. Not as a roommate. I want more. The words cracked open something bright and aching in my chest. I want more too. We smiled like idiots, the kind of smile that doesn't need witnesses. The days after were softer. We still kept it quiet, old habits, but the air between us hummed. He'd brush my hand when he passed the salt. I'd find excuses to lean over his shoulder while he sketched, breathing in the cedar and coffee scent of him. At the bookstore where I worked weekends, he'd appear with 2 coffees and a crooked grin, lingering just long enough for Mrs. Delgado to raise an eyebrow and mutter something about young love. Then his brother Luca announced a visit. Elias paced the kitchen like a caged thing, phone clutched in one hand, the other raking through his hair until it stood up in defiant tufts. He'll ask why I've never brought anyone home, he said. Why I dodge questions about dating. I don't know what to tell him. I set down my mug. Tell him the truth. It's not that simple. It is if we make it. He stopped pacing, looked at me like I'd grown a second head. You want to tell people? I want to stop lying. He crossed the room in 3 strides, cupped my face in hands that trembled just slightly. You're braver than me. No, I said. Just tired of pretending. Luca arrived with a duffel bag and a grin that could power a small city. He was taller than Elias, louder, the kind of person who filled doorways. He noticed everything, the way Elias's hand lingered on my lower back when he passed, the way our knees touched under the table during dinner. He didn't say anything until the second night. When he found us on the fire escape sharing a cigarette neither of us really smoked, he said, leaning against the railing, you don't have to hide from me. Elias went still. I felt the tension coil in his shoulders. Luca's voice softened. He makes you happy. That's enough. Elias looked at me, then back at his brother. Yeah, he said, voice rough. He does. It was small. It was everything after Luca left. The dam broke. We didn't shout it from rooftops, but we stopped editing ourselves. At game nights, Elias's arms stayed draped over my shoulders. At the bar, he introduced me as Milo, my partner, the words settling between us like a promise. People noticed. Some smiled. Some didn't. It didn't matter. One night, months later, we stood on the same fire escape where Luca had given his blessing. The city sprawled below us, a constellation of light and noise. Elias's chin rested on my head, his arms loose around my waist. I used to think love was a lightning strike, he said. Bright, loud, impossible to miss. And now? Now I know it's the radiator. It's clanking at 3 a.m., it's burnt toast and inside jokes, and the way you steal the blankets but always leave me the corner with the tag. It turned me to face him, eyes soft. It's this us, quiet and stubborn and real. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. So we're not just roommates anymore. His grin was crooked, perfect. Nope, we're the whole damn story. The city kept moving below us, indifferent and alive. Up here, though, the world was small enough to hold in 2 hands. It smelled like coffee and cedar and the promise off tomorrow. And it had started the night I thought we were just sharing Renton till he reached for my hand in the dark and didn't let go.